Hello, hello, beautiful friends and family, light beings, beautiful souls. Today I want to chat about the topic of channeling. And this may not be your typical channeling video. Uh, my intention with this is to shed a little bit of light from my own experience on what I've kind of come to recognize about channeling and about this concept, idea, tool that we are all seeming to be so obsessed with in the spiritual community. And I feel that there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen around this topic, especially right now. So there's a lot of videos out there that are teaching us to open up these psychic faculties, to dive deeper into channeling, to connecting with higher beings, with maybe other aspects of ourself. And in the beginning of my journey, I got really wrapped up in the kind of new age spiritual community and a lot of these topics, because when we're coming out of the matrix and we're kind of seeing all of these different things that we've been lied to about and all of these different kind of pessimistic and negative aspects of our reality, there's kind of this gravitational pull towards the sparkly new age feeling that all of these modalities and otherworldly kind of dynamics give us. And there's nothing wrong with this at all. I spent a few years being very much in these higher realms and just being almost obsessed with this idea of channeling. I was like, I want to be able to channel. I want to be able to speak to other beings. I want to be able to have these psychic faculties turn on. I want to be able to have visions, and I want to be able to hear my guides, and I want to be able to know who my guides are and know all my past lives. And of course, there's still a part of me that is excited about that. Absolutely. How could we not be, right? Like, as humans, just awakening to the fact that we're more than this mind and we're more than this body is already such an exciting phenomenon and truth for us. And to start tapping into how vast our cosmos are and how all of this exists within us as this internal technology to kind of interface with life, it kind of gives this feeling that we get to be a superhuman here, right? Like that we get to be so much more than what we've perceived as ourself so far in this life. But what I want to share with you today is some, I wouldn't call them warnings, but just words of caution when it comes to these kind of faculties and gifts and abilities. And I'm not saying don't use them. I'm not hating on them at all. I use these myself. But these are things that I've learned along the way that I really wish that I would have understood a little bit earlier on. And of course, I also recognize that everything happened exactly the way it was meant to, for me to be able to have the perspective that I do now and to be able to share that, to hopefully make your experience in these realms and with these modalities a little bit more graceful. So one of the topics that I want to chat about a little bit today is discernment. I'm sure you've heard this word thrown around quite a bit. I remember talking to one of my good friends who was a little bit like a guide for me in the beginning of my journey when it came to otherworldly phenomenon. And she would use this word over and over and over again. Discernment, discernment, discernment. I still remember how often she would say this word, and I didn't really understand what it meant. Like, I understood the dictionary definition, but I didn't understand the value and potency of what that word really means in terms of the spiritual realm or the invisible realm. And discernment is something that we build kind of like a muscle. And the way that I look at discernment now is our ability to experience a sensation, a message, a feeling, in these other dimensions. And not even just in other dimensions, even just here on Earth. But to be able to experience something and have the awareness or the listening, right? The body listening, the awareness within our body and our resonance to know what our intuition is saying, what is right for us. And this means being able to tune out what other people say is right for you or what you should be doing or what is your path. There's so many of those narratives bouncing around in our physical realm and even in the invisible realm, just by people's thoughts and the collective belief systems about we should be doing or who we should be. And to be able to tune into your own resonance and discern what is for you and what is not for you, or what is serving you and what is not serving you, is, in my opinion, a really important prerequisite before we start going into trying to channel all of these higher dimensional beings. And the reason that I say that is because, yes, higher dimensional beings exist, higher aspects exist, and just because we deem them higher does not mean that they are higher in the respect that they have more wisdom than us. This can be the case. They may be able to see things from a broader view than we do in form at times. But that doesn't mean that their agenda is aligned with your agenda. Just because you're channeling something in another realm doesn't mean that they have the same intention for you that you have for yourself, or even for humanity. And I think that this is something that is not spoken about enough in our community right now. There seems to be a huge wave of people awakening to the initial recognition that I'm more than this body and this mind, which is extremely exciting. And then there's almost this movement, because of social media and these things being so prevalent, there's this movement directly into all of these modalities of, okay, now that I'm awake, this means this. So if you go on social media and you start to engage with this spiritual community, it almost feels like, okay, now that I'm awake, this means that I'm involved with, channeling, higher dimensional beings, Reiki, crystals, all of these things. And although that there is a lot of positive to this because it introduces us to so many different topics, the other side of this, to be aware of, nothing, it doesn't have to be negative, but just to be aware of, is that we're being constantly imbued with other people's association of what is spiritual. Or we're being imbued with other people's journeys, their reflections, their experiences of what is right and wrong for them. And because we're coming from this space of seeing through the illusion of an authority that had our best interest in mind or at heart, we're coming from this space where we thought authority was, these people who are taking care of us and all this, and then that falls away very quickly in our awakening. We start to see through the illusion and the lies of what's really going on here. And from that, we're kind of in this space of seeking a new type of authority, right? We're even if it's subconscious, we're kind of replacing these things that we're throwing out. We're picking up new versions of them. So we're throwing out the old authority, but then we're kind of seeking like new leaders, new teachers. And so rather than going within and figuring out, what does spirituality mean to me? How can I be taught by the natural world and by just being led by synchronicity? And we can, doesn't happen to everybody, but it's very common to get caught up in the social media narrative of what's working for others. And so there becomes another theme, or there becomes a collective movement around these specific types of spiritual experience. And that's beautiful. This is obviously, it's all happening for a reason, so there's nothing wrong with this. I'm just bringing awareness to it because it's something that as we begin to see it in ourselves, as we begin to kind of ride the wave that everybody else has been on, we also start to recognize certain things that aren't in resonance with us. And sometimes this can take some time because we are running on that belief that, okay, if this is working for all of these people, then it must work for me too. And then when it's not working for us, we start to kind of fall into those traps of comparison or judgment or whatever it might be. And in reality, or not in reality, but in retrospect or in hindsight for me, I'm seeing that there's so many spaces that I was in where it would have actually been maybe a bit more graceful or easy for me to let go of the common narrative of what spirituality was and to ask myself, what does this mean for me? And this is more of the stance that I'm taking now. But I share this not with regret of my own path whatsoever, because I know that it was perfect and it couldn't have been any other way. But from hindsight, we can always see the lessons, right? And so for me, this is something that I would love to support others in understanding, is that your spiritual awakening and what comes through for you and how you discern and how you feel your resonance and your intuition is entirely unique. We may have commonalities with others when it comes to, our aura type in human design, or our astrological placements, or just certain aspects of being a human that we can all relate to. Absolutely. And this is beautiful that we can come together and have those commonalities and share. And this experience in physical form and having an awakening in human form is all about utilizing this life as a toolbox. That's the way I like to look at it, or a playground. But when I say toolbox, what I mean is like every single thing around you can be used as a tool for you to experience and awaken further to truth. Everything. And when we're on social media, we're being constantly bombarded by a very select few types of tools. And so we kind of continue that level of consumerism. And I have another video on this that is really helpful on creatorship versus consumerism. But we can kind of fall into that little bit of a hole, or a hamster wheel of consumerism in our spirituality, rather than originality, of novelty, of innovation, of what is speaking to our specific soul frequency when we go out into our environment and we explore. So we hear a lot about, coming back to childlike curiosity. That is what I'm talking about. If you can go out in your reality and ask yourself, what kind of tools do I want to play with to experience my awakening? And, to some of us, those kind of questions can actually be a little bit triggering, because we're so used to having people tell us what to do or tell us how to experience life. And we're used to jumping right onto Google and Googling how-to videos, or how is it that I, let's use channeling for example. If you're wanting to channel, our first instinct is like, okay, let me just go on YouTube and find out from somebody else. I encourage you in this realm, if channeling or if connecting in higher realms is something that you're interested in, that is a very unique and intimate experience that is going to have so much more depth and joy in exploration when it comes from that childlike curiosity. And this also is paired with the wisdom of discernment. So, I'm trying to think which way I want to go with this, because I want to talk a little bit about my experience that brought me to this subject, because these things can really bite us in the ass if we dive into them too quickly. Okay, I'm going to go with this first. So, let's say with channeling, for example. I, for years, probably like 2 years straight, was obsessed with the idea of channeling. And if I'm being completely honest about that, it was all egoic. There was, of course there's an excitement involved, right? An excitement to have access to these other realms. It's like our childhood dream of being in Harry Potter or something coming real. So there's a very innocent and pure intention there as well. But if I'm being completely honest, there was a part of me that was not feeling fulfilled as who I was at the time, that thought that channeling would give me some sort of hierarchical power status, or it would somehow make me special. It would make people listen to me. It would make people see me and recognize me and give me something of value. And so a lot of my trying, my deep desire for that faculty to open was coming from one of the lower chakras, right? One of these kind of more survival-based instincts, right? Because when we're seeking social status, when we're seeking power, that comes from the lower chakras, because we haven't yet opened and accessed our heart chakra to its full capacity. And the beauty of something like channeling is that when we are able to activate and open our hearts and be in a state of love and unconditional compassion for humans and for all life, those abilities, like channeling, like being psychic, all of these things are actually a natural, organic experience that tend to unfold without us trying. But when we are trying for something, when we're like, trying oftentimes comes from a need that comes from our ego saying that we are in some way lacking or inadequate, right? So It's an illusion, but it's a very, very real feeling illusion for us as we build up through the chakras. So when we're feeling that need, and we're feeling that lack, and we're trying so hard to turn on something that's actually not ready to be turned on usually, right? Usually we notice this along this path that when we're trying for something, it means we're not getting it for a reason. And the feeling of trying is there to show us that we're out of alignment with accepting what is. And when we actually can exist in acceptance and love of our present moment, even in the absence of all of these sparkly, beautiful, otherworldly faculties that we all desire, when we can love ourselves in the absence of those and find substance and value in our presence, no matter what that looks like, we begin to open up into the heart, right? As we begin to release this constant addiction to the mental realm, and we begin to settle into our present moment and accept ourselves as we are, we start to have this opening of our heart space. And this is, again, a natural unfoldment. Opening the heart is not something that you have to force or try so hard to do. If you have the intention to open your heart, I can promise you that that is the divine saying, I'm ready to open. And it is a natural process. And in fact, us trying so hard and forcing and doing all of these things to try and hurry up the process sometimes blocks us. Because the action of trying says to the universe that you don't actually have what it is you're trying to get. Does that make sense? It's like the energy of wanting. If you're wanting something, you're saying to the universe, I don't have this thing. You're proclaiming lack. You're proclaiming lack. So in order to truly get something that you want, rest in gratitude. When we can rest in gratitude, those things happen naturally. And gratitude, it goes hand in hand with our present moment. What is it that you are grateful for right now? And I know that that is such a cliche word that we throw around so much, like unity consciousness and gratitude and unconditional love. Can you find something new with those words in this moment? Can you have a new experience with these words that is not at all cheesy, that is not at all cliche, but is actually quite profound for you? Really, sit with that for a minute right now. What would it feel like in this moment for me to feel a natural unfoldment of gratitude? Not something that I have to force, but if I just allow, can gratitude just arise naturally for exactly what this present moment is, without needing to add anything to it, without needing to be a different version of yourself? Can you feel the release and the relax of your body as you accept that this moment is perfect, that it needs nothing, that you are no more or less spiritual with your heart open or closed? Isn't that an interesting one? Who you are right now is just as equally spiritual as anybody else, as any other being. You are no more or less important based on your spiritual to-do list, based on who you can channel or what messages you can bring through. And actually, the more that you can rest in that gratitude of what is presenting itself through you in this moment, in every now moment, the quicker that process or journey to channeling into these other faculties will be. Because when we're in the present moment with acceptance of what is rather than resistance of what is, we're saying yes to life. And when we say yes to life, we're saying yes to the organic ascension process, which includes all of these other worldly abilities. But it also includes an ease of transition into the heart space. And this means also less need. So I'm sure you've all experienced this, when we are living in our heart, when our heart's open, and this isn't like you turn it on once and it's on forever. It's an ebb and flow, right? There's a fluctuation between being in our hearts and sometimes not being in our hearts, and that's okay. You're never falling behind. It's just a part of living in polarity and contrast, and a part of this human experience. But when you are in your heart, notice next time you're feeling really open, really, really in your heart space. Maybe you just had a great cup of cacao, or you just came out of a really profound meditation where you felt your connection with all of life. Do you notice how when you're in your heart, you don't feel need? You actually feel such an abundance that you want to give. You want to like reach out to everybody around you and tell them how much they mean to you. You want to be able to give support to those who need support. You want to like find people and just uplift them. You want to share the abundance, because there is abundance and there's so much of it that you are like, how can I share this with others and help them feel what I'm feeling? And that's because you're in recognition energetically of others being you, and that what you give, you are also giving to yourself. So when you're in this space of gratitude, of presence, of unconditional love, of all of life, from that place of not needing, you receive. You receive these faculties, you receive these abilities in divine timing for you. And when we're in a space of not needing, think about this in terms of channeling. If you go into these higher realms and your heart is closed off, and you're operating more from your lower centers, meaning you're also operating more from ego, from survival-based mechanisms. Again, there is no judgment here. This is just a recognition of how things seem to operate. So when you go into these higher realms and you're just operating from the lower chakras, and you're still maybe like where I was, where you're feeling this desire to channel because you have an agenda. You have this power agenda. You have to be really honest with yourself here, right? It's natural as humans to have these agendas, to have these maybe seemingly impure intentions. And guys, it's a part of the journey. Don't beat yourself up if you're in that space. We all go through it. It's just a recognition and being honest with ourselves of where our intention's really coming from. Can you tell yourself the truth? So when my intention was coming from these lower chakras, what happens is that when you go into these higher realms, it doesn't mean that you can't channel. It doesn't mean that you can't channel. But your vibration, when you're in these lower chakras, is only at a certain place. And when you're coming from a place of need, and you're not in your heart, when you're coming from a place of needing or desiring power over another, the way that I am always shown this is you leave these gaping holes, these blind spots. So because you have this kind of subtle, maybe not always subtle, but this subtle desperation to bring through information in order to have power, in order to play a certain identity or role in the world so that you can, it generally comes to power, but it could be a lot of different things. But if you have that, you have these blind spots. So other beings may very well come and start speaking to you and communicating to you, but they're matching you vibrationally, and they're going to capitalize on those blind spots. They are going to play into the subconscious agenda that you have for power by feeding you things that make your ego feel really propped up. They're going to really prop up your identity in the world. And oftentimes they do bring through a lot of truth. Doesn't mean that they're going to, be completely distortion based or manipulate you entirely. That could be the case. But oftentimes they do provide a lot of truth. But a lot of it is also skewed to support their own agenda. So they're essentially kind of using you as a puppet. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. If this has happened to you or might happen to you, it is nothing to be afraid of, and it's nothing to feel like you need to be overly cautious or in fear of. If that happens, it's a part of your journey. It's a part of your experience in your own discernment. I have had very, very close relations with these realms and these understandings, and this is why I'm speaking on this, because I've seen these things go in ways that are not graceful, are very explosive in some ways, and can affect a lot of people. And in hindsight, it was a blessing for me to see that experience play out in people close to me. And so there's no regret, and there's no feeling like that shouldn't have happened, because it worked out perfectly. And I'm sharing this so that if you resonate with this message and it provides you something to be able to avoid something that may provide your experience more grace, then that is beautiful. But know also that it's not something that you have to go through life feeling a ton of fear around. Discernment doesn't mean feeling like overly protected and armored in all cases. Discernment means learning to listen to your intuition and going into these spaces from a place of not needing anything from it. How empowering will it be for you to go into these higher realms, experience these other dimensions, going into it with absolutely no need for anything? You feel complete, you feel whole, you feel that you don't need to have power over anyone because you feel completely empowered and sovereign in yourself. Imagine the vibration that you carry and the types of beings that will contact you when you're coming from that space. That space is what is going to attract the beings that are actually here to support the highest organic timelines of ascension for planet Earth. Those vibrations of love, being in our hearts, being in a space where we're not trying to control or have power over or have any kind of hierarchy over others based on our abilities and knowledge, that vibration, if we can carry that into these other realms, is what's going to attract messages that come through truly of love and support, that don't have this other agenda to pull Earth into maybe inorganic timelines or to sway them to support other dimensional beings' timelines. So the reason that I create this video is just to encourage you that if channeling and all these things feels like something that you're really intrigued with and you really want to tap into, I get it. I have been there, still very much there. And what I will say is that when I actually stopped trying to channel and stopped placing so much focus on higher dimensional beings, and I started to recognize that I'm actually that higher dimensional being, and I came to Earth to have a human experience of opening my heart and seeing how I can support humanity here on Earth. And when I started to open my heart more, and when I started to feel less and less need for anything, but specifically for these other powers, guess what happened? Those abilities and those powers gained a lot of momentum for me and turned on to new levels and had much more profound messages. And now it feels extremely empowering to go into those spaces because I don't feel like I need anything. And when we don't need anything, when we're channeling, it's so much easier to believe the messages that come through. Before, when I would try to channel, I would always have this doubt in the way. Even when I was trying to channel, I could channel, but I had so much resistance and so much self-doubt in the way of my channeling because there was this need that was creating resistance. There was this deep egoic need in me to have it be something. And it's like placing this pressure on ourselves, this outcome type of pressure on ourselves that creates a little bit of difficulty in being able to have a flow or an open fluid channel with these different types of beings or even just with our higher self. Whereas now when I channel, because I don't feel that need, I would be just as easily satisfied if I didn't channel as if I did. I enjoy it. I think it's magical, so maybe I shouldn't say it equally. It still feels very much like a superpower, but it feels so much more like a superpower now that I don't feel that I need it to have power over anybody. In fact, now when I channel things, I don't feel like I even have any need to share that I channeled it. I even just feel like this is amazing information for me that I can use in what I share, but I don't need to go around telling people, oh, this came from other beings, because I'm a higher dimensional being, you know? That's who we are. They're no more important or more sacred or more special than we are. And it doesn't make anybody more important if they're channeling higher dimensional beings. So that is my encouragement to you. If you're in a place where you're wanting to turn on those abilities, be in your present moment with absolute adoration and curiosity for what is arising through your human experience. Get to the point where you fall in love with the human experience before you try to go deeply into these other realms. Because when we fall in love with our human experience and with what is unfolding as this beautiful creation of life without escaping it into these higher realms, that's when we can feel an embrace of our heart space and an embrace of who we really came to be. We are higher dimensional beings that came here to have a human experience to change what spirituality looks like on this planet. We didn't come here as higher dimensional beings to turn on all of these faculties and escape this realm. It's not an escape, it's an embrace. There's a lot of escapism that goes on in the spiritual community, and I was absolutely in that realm where I was like, get me out of here. These other realms are way more exciting and way more fun. You know what's fun? Falling absolutely in love with the contrast and polarity of what this beautiful human experience can be, and in doing so, finding out that all of those magical abilities that have been accessed by us in past lives and in other realms and in other star systems, that those get to be a part of it too. But it is an organic experience. You do not need somebody to teach you how to do it. If that calls to you, that's fine. But if it comes from a place of needing it to support a certain type of role or feeling of hierarchy, ditch it. I promise you, you will have so much more expansion and fun in the organic way that it unfolds for you with ease as you just fall in love with who you are in the present moment. I know that that doesn't sound as exciting always, but it is. The present moment is so incredibly fresh. 0 point awareness. Being able to see what is from a brand new perspective without the mind's almost like word vomiting all over it, all of its concepts and ideas and labels, but really being able to be in this moment and seeing things as if you're seeing them for the first time, being able to experience yourself outside of all of these past conditioning programs. All of these things are accessible to us in the present, but that is what takes devotion. And I encourage people, place your devotion there. Place your devotion in getting to know your present moment before you devote yourself to all of these other abilities that can easily embellish the ego and create a lot of ungraceful moments. So that is my little take on channeling. I have a feeling that for those of you who really do prioritize your heart in the present, that these abilities will turn on so much quicker and you will feel so much more empowered in engaging with them. So I hope that this supported you. If it did, please subscribe, share, like, whatever you feel called to do. I do feel like this message right now is an important one for a lot of humans. So if there's somebody that you think of when you watch this, I highly encourage sharing it. And I am really working on growing this channel. I'm going to be putting more time into this right now. So if you did enjoy this, please subscribe, please share. It would really mean a lot to me. Much love to all of you. Namaste.